You know, one of the things that we talked about when we decided to put on the inaugural North America Summit was we wanted to encompass the whole of North America. For the previous 3 years, we'd actually put on a U.S.-Mexico policy summit. It was on the bilateral relationship. We did that for 3 years. We did it in Mexico City. We did it in Austin, Texas. We did it here in Washington, D.C. And so we decided to expand it this year into the North America Summit. But one thing that became clear to us is we went ahead and examined the agenda and the contours and the security and trade issues in the Americas was it really drove home to us that there's an overlooked element of American policy. And when I say American, I don't mean just the United States, I mean the Americas in general. And one thing that's tremendously overlooked is the fact that European powers are American powers too. And I don't just mean this from a historical perspective, but you really have a situation in which you've got 5 European countries in particular that play tremendous active roles in the Americas right now. 4 of them have territorial holdings. One of them, Spain, has a terrific economic and cultural influence that is so tremendous that it's actually dispositive in setting a lot of the hemispheric agenda. And so that's really what we want to discuss today. When we look at the Americas, we see Britain, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark, all with territorial holdings in the Americas. And one thing that I want to say up front to all of you here is that I think it is a mistake, a terrific mistake, to regard these territorial holdings as mere holdovers of empire. I think that's a common mistake that Americans, estadounidenses, make when they think of these holdings. So I'd like to go ahead and start off by giving each of the panelists an opportunity to speak for a couple of minutes on what it means to be both a European and an American power.
Spaniards feel European, of course, but we feel very much Latin American. So for Spain, America is part of our identity. At this moment, we have 4 million Latin Americans living in Spain. 13.8% of our workforce is Latin American. It's not a new relation.
Ambassador Neliupsienė, over to you.
So European Union in Latin American countries is actually third largest, or for us, Latin America countries are third largest trading partner. And actually, in the last decade, the trade grown up by 45%. So it's increasing by day and by hour as we speak. European Union countries have almost $1 trillion foreign direct investments in Latin American countries. And China, Canada, Japan, and Singapore taken together has actually less. So whenever we hear the headlines that some of our competitors actually are overspending or overinvesting or have some kind of over-the-top requirements vis-a-vis those countries, I think we have to be very clear to what we are doing there and why we are there. So we have free trade agreements with almost all Latin American and Caribbean countries. So that actually gives a possibility for us to have this trade and very deep relations, because none of our free trade agreement actually goes only about trade. It's about cooperation in multiple fields, from the security, raw materials, people-to-people contacts, education, research.
Thank you. Mr. Cristofari.
A few words on France. So we do have a long-standing and very diverse relation with the Americas as a whole. Of course, I should start by mentioning the special historical bond that we have with this country, and that we're going to celebrate this year with America 250. As you know, we're proud to be the oldest ally of the United States, as we say. But then when it comes to Latin America, we also share a lot of priorities with them. As the ambassador was saying, there is a number of challenges that we have to face together. I would mention a few of them: drug trafficking, migration challenges, climate and environment issues. So all of this is subject to a regular dialogue between us, between France and the countries of this region, including at the highest level. Our president was there in 2024 in Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, and back again in last November in Mexico and Brazil. Latin America is a major business partner. Our share of this 500 billion is 20, so it's not that much, but still most of the big French companies are in these countries. And last but not least, of course, we are an American state via our 6 territories in the region. So we have French Guiana on the mainland. Then we have 4 islands in the Caribbean: Martinique, Guadeloupe, Saint-Martin, and Saint-Barthélemy. And last but not least, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, which is also a very tiny island off the coast of Canada. And as you were saying, these territories are French territories, are fully French territories. If I may compare to the situation in the US, that would be our Hawaii. Okay? So the French government is as involved in these territories as it is in the mainland France.
If you started to market to tourists the destination of French Hawaii, people would flock. Guy Dampier, so give us kind of the broader picture of British civic perspective. Britain obviously has multiple possessions, not just in the North American sphere, but in the Western Hemisphere in general. What does it mean for Britain to be an American power?
England obviously has a very long history with the Americas. You are in many ways our child. You've grown somewhat bigger than us.
No, I was just assured that the French created us, so you'll have
apologies.
to... Apologies.
Yeah, well, to be fair, the French...
and the Spanish too, actually. Everybody here takes credit for the United States. So.
To be fair, I do have a Norman surname, so the French created me as well. I'm afraid I'm your problem. And that's probably the most obvious one, that America is a child of us in that way. But of course, there's also Canada. Canada itself, we share a king together, even if we no longer share a government. We have the British Overseas Territories, which are not formally part of Britain in the way that the French ones are, because we don't like that kind of centralization. We like a little bit of eccentricity, but they are British. And actually, Britain also has quite a strong history in Latin America, which does not tend to be thought about particularly much. But there were large waves of British migration to South America. One of the largest Welsh-speaking communities can be found in Patagonia. If you happen to speak any Welsh, I'm sure there may be nobody here that does that, apart from me. And bar a little unpleasantness over with Argentina in the 1980s, actually, we've generally got along pretty well with people there. And if you travel across Latin America, you will usually find that we have managed to set up a school and probably a donkey shelter, because that's our priority. And we will have that shared history there, which is always very pleasant to see. So we are a fully hemispheric power in many ways. A lot of it is cultural, but we do have our presence here, and we continue to exercise our influence in our own little way.
You mentioned, obviously correctly, that the French territories in the North American sphere and the Western Hemisphere in general are not territories. They're considered integral parts of France. They're departements. There's 2 French regiments in French Guiana, for example. There's a launch facility. What does it mean to have these integral parts in France? Fundamentally, are these remnants? Are these remnants of empire, or are they launch pads to something else?
I will start with an anecdote. Martinique and Guadeloupe have been French since the 17th century. Corsica, where I am from, has been French since the 18th century. So just to give you a historical perspective, these territories are French since ever. And we're all French. I mean, I think every French citizen knows someone who is from this region. So it's really part of the national community. What does it mean? It means that, as you said, the French state being the French state, highly centralized, so you will find there all the services that the French government provides in its mainland territory. Social security, health, police, education. And when you go there, if you've ever been there, you will see immediately that you're in France. You cannot be mistaken. So that's number one. Number two, we do have indeed security forces there because it's our national territory. So their duty is mainly to protect the national territory, but they also take part in a variety of security tasks, such as fight against drug trafficking, fight against illegal gold mining, illegal fishing, and these kind of things. And then, of course, we have our space center in French Guiana since 1968. So it's probably the first and most telling example of what this region means for us strategically. This center is probably one of the best example. It offers 22 European member states of the European Space Agency an independent access to space.
The British model is, of course, qualitatively very different. Does the United Kingdom see these possessions, particularly the Falklands, I would say, have become qualitatively different just through force of circumstance, but particularly in the Caribbean and the Atlantic, are they remnants? Are they a launch pad to something new? What's the role, the constitutional role, and really the political role, classically understood, that they play?
So America is Britain's first empire. A lot of people think of the British Empire, redcoats, Africa, Asia, all that sort of thing. But actually, that second empire only really lasted about 100 years. I mean, in India, for example, 1859 to 1947, it's about 90 years. In America, Bermuda, for example, we have been there since, I think, 1608 or 1609. So anywhere between 2 and 4 times most of the rest of the world. That means it's not quite a relic of empire, particularly because of the element of settlement that we've had. And that is what's qualitatively different about Britain in North America, is the element of settlement. That it's not people ruling over, necessarily. It's people living there, and they have been living there consistently for hundreds of years. On the other hand, I think the Falklands is a good example, in the sense that the Falklands was something that everyone sort of forgot that we still ran. The Foreign Office actually rather wanted to get rid of it to the Argentinians, and the Argentines then invaded it under their fascist dictatorship, so I'm sure all the good anti-fascists in the room will support Britain on that. They invaded it, and having invaded it, Britain can and never will ever give it back, because it has now become a point of national pride. I think it's a relatively similar thing with the British Overseas Territories. Most people don't really know that we have them. Most people don't think about them. The Foreign Office mostly thinks about them as a way to go and get a good suntan. But they are there. They're very strategically located. They are very close, mostly to North America or in the Caribbean. They have a unique set of challenges, and challenges where we should be cooperating with our neighbors, including with the Americans. And so I think that they should be a launch pad, but they are not currently.
Ambassador Neliupsienė, you've talked about the trade relationship between the European Union writ large and the Americas in general, talking about integral European possessions in French in this case, but also Dutch and Danish elsewhere, because Greenland is a realm within the Kingdom of Denmark, and Dutch termic countries, I think, is the translation that they use for Curaçao and Aruba. So these are European Union areas too. I can't say possessions, can I? Whatever the term of art is, these are parts of the EU. They're in the Americas. How does the fact of EU territory in the Americas enter into EU policy writ large? It's got to be more than just the trade relationship.
So what French, Spain, or Dutch have, actually, it's part of the EU. What the Danes have is actually not, but part of NATO.
Oh, my apologies. My apologies to the Danes who are nowhere in the room. So, yeah.
You have to apologize, Greenlanders.
you can say that an American actually increased EU territory with Greenland. So, yes.
Thank you. I think that we are like steadily moving that direction. So look, definitely the relations are much more than trade. So first of all, it's the very long-lasting cooperation, for example, on security issues. One of this was mentioned already by Damien about drug prevention and safety operations. All operations which are happening in the region is either happening between the EU member states and Latin America countries, or trilaterally US, or sometimes Canada involved. So it never is that something happens without Europeans being present. We spend around 500 million actually only on cooperation in this field, improving seaports, improving security checks, teaching and educating their border guards, lots of other things. We are quite invested in general in cooperating in research and development in there. With the Greenland, we have a special relations, we have a cooperation. We are working on a new joint statement, a new outline, how the cooperation would look like. We have an office there. We have invested around, as well, as of now, around 225 million euros, mostly in education in Greenland, but as well in some of the infrastructural projects.
Ambassador Moreno, I want to turn to you in Spain's role. One of the things that's absolutely notable, I've done work in Africa and in Asia, and so typically, I don't want to overstate the case, but generally speaking, you can go to, say, a former British possession, and they will have the history, they'll frequently have the forms of government, they'll be a member of the Commonwealth, but there's rarely a sense of Britain as kind of a psychic presence or a cultural presence in the place there. There's sort of an act of formation that occurred in history and then times move on. It's not the case in Latin America with Spain. Now, I'm not going to ask you to comment on this, so don't feel like I'm putting you on the spot, because it would be very awkward. But as you know, the alcalde de Madrid was just in Mexico, and she's caused a how do I say this diplomatically? This is going to be on YouTube, so I have to be really careful. Turmoil is the word we're using? Okay, that's fine. There's been a fracas in Mexico over she's taken sides in a particular Mexican civic debate over the role of Spain and Mexican history and so on and so forth. That's not what this panel is about, but ask me my opinion on it later. The reason that I bring it up is it illustrates that Spain is still there. Spain is still in Latin America, not just from a physical standpoint in terms of investment, but as a participant in civics and cultural life. And what is illuminated for me, in particular in my own work, is that it is impossible to work in Latin America, me as senior director for Western Hemisphere Initiative, without engaging Spain as well and including it in our analyses. Talk to me about the qualitatively unique nature of Spanish power in the Americas, given that phenomenon that's everywhere.
Spain doesn't own any piece of territory in Latin America. We are equal partners with all countries. We have this big community, the Comunidad Iberoamericana de Naciones. We meet on a regular basis at all levels, ministers, heads of state, of government, etc. We create relations in all fields: political, economic, social, industrial, scientific, cinema, the literature. Referring to certain numbers, Spain is the second largest investor in Latin America. Compared to the US, we are the 11th here. For instance, in Mexico, we have around 7,800 companies, Spanish companies working there. We have 700 in the US. This gives you the numbers. I referred to the participation of Latin Americans in the Spanish growth and the Spanish fabric today. The mayor of Madrid goes to Mexico, and anything she does is an issue, or it was the president of the community. She wanted to do an event on Hernán Cortés, and it was forbidden, so it's a domestic issue. Whatever the opposition leaders who are living in Madrid say is also a domestic issue.
The United States has been involved in military operations in the Caribbean basin now in a serious and sustained way for the past year. Operation Southern Sphere, obviously Operation Absolute Resolve on January 3rd, which brought Nicolas Maduro to justice. But one thing I think that's overlooked is that the trafficking operations that came out of Venezuela, particularly with the illegal drugs, a lot of that trafficking went to the United States. Certainly the human trafficking went to the United States. But in terms of the illegal substances, the narcotics, the drugs, and so on, the bulk of them appear to have gone to Europe. Yet we don't really see European participation in the provision of Caribbean basin security, certainly not in cooperation with the Americans. The British have stopped sharing intelligence with us on that. But France has the most credible European military contingent in the Western Hemisphere, I think it's fair to say, mostly based in French Guiana. Where is that French role in the provision of regional security?
Yes, it's true. We do have security forces in Guyana and one in the Caribbean. Regarding the drug trafficking, so I think we can all agree on the fact that it's a common challenge, because indeed there are no boundaries. Traffickers know no boundaries, so the drugs that are coming from this region go to the US, but also go to Europe at some point. So that's why we've been seriously involved in this fight against drug trafficking. And we do it in cooperation with the US most of the time. I'll give you an example. We have French officers permanently deployed in the Joint Interagency Task Force South, which is in Key West, Florida. So we do cooperate with them on a very almost daily basis. We don't agree with the method. We think that the strikes are questionable under international law. I think our American partners know it. So I think we agree to disagree on this, but it doesn't mean that we don't share the challenges. And the ultimate goal is the same. We all want drug trafficking to be weakened. We want this region to be secure and safe. So we might differ on the ways to reach this point, but I think on the overall objective, we're aligned.
Given that so much of the European conversation, honestly for the past decade at this point, has centered upon securing American commitment to European security, is there any European conversation, kind of building off Mr. Cristofari's comments, is there any European conversation on contributing to American and Western Hemispheric security at the same time?
I think that if we treat security as really very broad concept, because when we have to speak about security, sometimes we kind of okay, this is only about defense. But in this world particular, security is not only about really a physical military defense. Because what we are experiencing in Europe, a part of Russia's war in Ukraine, just next to our borders, we see the security challenges coming from the hybrid attacks, undersea cables. There are really asymmetric threats such as drones, and it's not only used by state actors, but as well of the non-state actors. And we usually, when we referred earlier, like a decade ago, about the non-state actors, we kind of would think about this, oh, this is about terrorism. No, actually, it is about, for example, organized crimes. If you look right now in different countries, in the different EU member states, how our security services, when they present their open part, like the public part of their security achievements or annual reports of what they have done, you will find that really our adversaries sometimes utilize the organized crime gangs in order to achieve. We can see that some things which are produced in one continent actually can be used in another continent. So someone in the previous panel mentioned that some of the people from the Latin American countries actually are fighting on the Russian side within the Ukrainian conflict. And I think this is where Europe we have to invest through our member states, because national security and security is still in the hands of the member states, and EU has no army. We are working on actually a very specific, very broad sanction regime, which would include organized crime, cartels, and everyone who is involved, for example, in drug trafficking, so that nobody can fall between the cracks. Because, sometimes due to the differences in the national regulations, you cannot really stop the people to flag them as the red flags and take care of them to make sure that those drugs or the other illicit actions are not transferred to Europe or among the LAC countries.